Hi guys, welcome back. I know it's been a while since I've done a review, but anyway, here I am with a review for the Yanyin Canon Pro, which is this IM over here. Um, I've had this IM now for maybe close to about 2 months, and I've listened to it quite extensively, and I think I've now reached a point where I can give a solid opinion about it. Not that my first impression of it and my latest impression of it have radically changed, no, but I just thought, since I haven't had the time that I've wanted to have to make the reviews as frequently as I have, I've ended up enjoying more listening to the IMs, going through them with a little bit more quality time and really enjoying them, what they can or cannot do. Anyway, the Canon, I've got here the Canon Mark II, the Canon Pro, and I've got here the Manga, the T2. And you'd be wondering, why have I got here the Manga T2? I mean, this is supposedly a very differently tuned IM to the rest. And yes, that is true. However, it does remind me a lot of the Canon Pro, or rather the Canon Pro does remind me a lot of the Manga T2. Anyway, let me break this down, and I'm not gonna make these reviews as long as I used to make them because I just don't have the time for it. So I'm gonna try and keep things as nicely condensed as possible. Yanyin, when they came out with the Canon, and as the name implied, they gave us an IM that not only was it exquisitely well built, beautiful resin shell, 3 tuning switches, one focusing on the bass, one focusing on the mids, one focusing on the high frequency, and you could feel that there was definitely a difference between those 3 settings. My favorite settings are the 110. Let me see if this thing will focus. Or the 110, or the one that I have here, which is the 010. These are my 2 favorite settings. It's the settings which I think overall give the better balance. And to cut a long story short, the Yanyin Canon, in terms of bass, it was never a problem. Be it the original, be it the Pro, the Pro, or be it the Mark II. That was never the issue with the Yanyin. The problem, and take that with a grain of salt when I say problem, was that the way that the mids and the highs were tuned could, depending on how you had the bass set up, be not as polished as desired, especially when we're talking about an IM which was close to $300 in the original format. The second version was just over the $300 price bracket, and now the latest one is well into the $300. So when you're talking about IMs in that price bracket, or any IM really, but when you're talking about the $300 for an IM, you are expecting certain things to be done in a polished manner. And the Canon, the original Canon, if you were not careful with how you set up the switches, yes, it would give you a lot of detail up top, yeah, without question, which would satisfy those of you that are more inclined for the more detailed presentations and the more technical presentations. Let's put it that way. But there was also a certain amount of let's say harshness present. And maybe harshness is a too strong of a word. Maybe I would say unpolished presentation, up to a certain level of volume, and depending on what the source was, it was all very well composed. And then depending on obviously what the source was, and especially if it was an ESS source, and if you started pushing the volume thing, things just got out of that balance, and it didn't scale as ideally as possible. And that's why I ended up choosing these settings on the original Canon, because I found that those ones were the ones that kind of gave the best compromise between the 3 frequencies. As I said, the bass was phenomenal, is phenomenal. It's a gliding style of bass, but very good bass, very good mid bass. It's clean, it's punchy, it's nothing to be said there. The real only issue here is in the upper mids and treble, where things could get occasionally just a little bit too enthusiastic. Let's put it that way. Past that, then yes, there was more than enough detail, and there's really nothing to be pointed in that aspect. Come the Mark II, and this was again beautifully built IM, no issues there, with 2 tuning switches this time. And the difference that was or that could be perceived between the tuning switches was a difference that centered itself more or rather basically in the bass. by playing around with them, you just got the difference in the output of the bass. It's a tuck style bass, which kind of tucks always at around 200 hertz, give or take. Yes, the upper frequencies, the mids, the upper mids and treble are significantly more polished than the original one. And I guess that's why also it got away with then this change in terms of the bass. If in the first version that gliding style of bass kind of helped mitigate some of the aggressiveness that sometimes you got upper in the in the mids to upper mids transition point there, with this tuck style bass, it actually helped clean up those mids, which had now become significantly cleaner, significantly better, more well tuned, more well mannered. Let's put it that way. And what basically we change is how much of that bass we want there present or not. So by tucking it a little earlier or later, we get a little bit more mid bass, and that will then change the overall tonality of the IM. I liked it both in the 1-1 position as I liked it in the 0-0 position. The 0-1 or 1-0 was kind of an intermediate, and not really, you couldn't really pick up too much of a difference between the two of them, but you could notice the difference between those two settings and then the either 1-1 setting or the 0-0 setting. Like I said, I like both the 1-1 setting or the 0-0 setting. Both of them are, they've got their strong points, and that's the beauty of having tuning switches. Enter now the Pro. And the Pro is a departure from the previous two, because we are now having 6 BAs. So we now have an IM that has grown in terms of numbers. We again have a phenomenal construction. Nothing to be said in terms of the construction. Beautiful. I think it's actually probably the most beautiful of the three in terms of the faceplate design. 2 switches again, and these 2 switches again only affect insignificantly the bass presentation. And what they do is kind of change again that tucking profile of the IM from a very sub-bass focused tuning in the setting where we have the switches in the off position, to a more present sub-bass and mid-bass energy there on the 1-1 setting. Again, I liked both presentations. I have to say that I liked both the way that the Pro sounded with the switches off and with the switches on, although ultimately I did end up going more for the switches on. And why? Because I did notice that in the switches off completely, if we are wanting to have that slam which usually exists there between, let's say, that 60-70 hertz area and that 300 hertz area, in the switches off position, it was way too controlled, way too thin. And so yes, it would be great with female vocals and so on and so forth, but if you have something which is a little bit more rock, rock, or you like that hip-hop presence, or that mid-bass thump there, and that slam rather, and you like as well that presence of the drums in the majority of pop music and so on and so forth, you need a little bit more mid-bass presence. So either you either go for the intermediate settings, which will increase, or then you just go straight away for the 1-1 setting, where the difference isn't that significant to the remaining of the available settings. In terms of the mids and upper mids and treble, this is without question the best version of the Canons. It's questionable whether the Canon name did make sense. Maybe they could have chosen a different name altogether, but there's a definite improvement, and obviously, of course, not only is it because we have now 6 BAs doing that whole section of the frequency range, or the majority of the frequency range. From, I'm sure that the BAs are handling everything above 500 hertz easily, but you can see that there's more care. There's been more care, there's been experience, there's been learning that's been applied, and now we have a much smoother sort of pinna gain, a much more plateaued response of the mids, upper mids and treble. You have a nice dip there at 5K, which will help reduce any problems that might sometimes occur with that area being sensitive to some of us, which was an area that in the original was a little bit emphasized. And you got a nice extension past 10K as well, so it gives definitely a nice sensation of soundstage, of openness, of space, without question. In terms of the accessories, I mean, you know, Yanyin never disappoints. They've changed from a rectangular case to this round one. Brings a nice selection of tips. Nice selection of tips. The cable is, as in previous versions as well, a very nice cable. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with the cable. I didn't even bother swapping it. 4.4 termination, so you could probably say that, okay, it's a pity it's not an interchangeable termination. The fitment of the Canon again is, as previous models, perfect, spot on, nothing to be said. And I mean, it's just a really good IM. That's the reality. Now, has the Canon let's say idea been maintained? I would say yes, to a certain extent. Yes, they've maintained that main idea of the Canon being an IM with a really well executed bass. Although truth be told, that yes, the Canon Mark II or even the Mark I will probably be more engaging in that aspect of the bass, especially the mid-bass part, because of the fact that they have way more energy. So I would say that these original ones are IMs which will probably be more, let's say, IMs if you're not looking for the ultimate in perfect execution of sound, although they can be made to sound really audiophile like if you spend time adjusting the tuning properly, and especially in the Mark II you will get a really good audiophile presentation. And mind you, I'm not saying in any way that they are not audiophile capable. I'm just saying that that maybe is not perhaps their strong point on either one of them. They are more fun, engaging, and being capable of playing really well and loud. I would kind of compare this to public address speakers. So okay, while now the Canon Pro has taken definitely a more mature approach. It's more audiophile focused. That's definitely the vibe that I'm getting from the Pro. While these two are more, let's say, really good sounding IM, you know, played loud and keeps its composure and so on and so forth, and fun and engaging and satisfies a lot of people. This is now more audiophile orientated, and what that means that perhaps the crowd of people that will like this will be a little bit more reduced. So, you know, if you're not a person that can really appreciate how smooth the Canon Pro can sound at times, this is maybe not the IM. And here enters where what I said in the beginning of the IM, of the review, where I mentioned the Manga T2. The original Manga was perhaps way too docile. The Manga T2, in my opinion, was the more balanced one, and this really is you know, the Pro really reminds me a lot of the Manga T2. Yes, you don't have in the Manga T2 the switches and so on and so forth, but you can adjust the switches here in the Pro to make it sound very much like the T2. So if you are a fan of the T2, I think you will definitely enjoy the Pro, in that the Pro, I think, is ever so slightly more capable than the Manga in terms of the bass, but very minor. I mean, the difference is by no means significant or anything of the sort, so trust me when I say it's minor. And on the other hand, the Manga then is slightly more polished in terms of the mids, upper mids, and treble, a little bit more laid back in that department. But overall, the balance of sound that both the Pro and the Manga T2 are able to give us is a very audiophile correct sound presentation. Nothing is done, you know, or nothing is done in a way that it stands out negatively across the whole frequency, and that's that. I mean, I really cannot. There's really not much more that I can say about the Pro. Without question, the better of the Pro, of the Canons, without question. That's true. They've maintained, you know, basically the idea of the Canon of being a fun, engaging IM, but in the Pro that there's a slight more focus on it being fun and engaging, but more audiophile correct. While that was something that didn't happen as much in the previous versions. You know, if I was to grade them, I would say the most fun and the most, let's say, how can I place these? How can I find the words yet so that I don't sound wrong? The most, for lack of a better words, let's put it this way: the most aggressive would be the original Canon, the most polished would be the Pro, and the Mark II is the kind of intermediate. Let's classify them that way, okay? And that's that, guys. Let me just quickly show you the graphs and we'll wrap it up. Okay, let me now quickly just show you the graphs. This is the graphs for the original Canon in the settings that I mentioned that I used, which is the 010 setting, and then this one is the 110 setting. There is some changes here that happens, you know, above 6Ks, but not really. Here is where you notice the difference. It's in the bass, and the difference is more noticeable than what you would think by this. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a difference of around 3 dBs almost, 2.5 dBs. But it's you hear more the difference. It's then the balance that's struck between this and then the rest. That's, you know, with that 2K point, 100 hertz that I usually point my attention to. All right. In that, I overall find that in the 110 setting, which is the orange line, it becomes overly bassy. While in the 010 setting it's more balanced in terms of the bass, but it's enough to just control a little bit more this peakiness that we have here. Okay. We then have the Mark II, which we have also you know, several bass several settings. This is the bass setting of 1.1, or rather the setting of the switches 1.1, the most bass, where you can see that now the mids, up mids, and treble are way more controlled, way more plateaued. And I'll show you now all of the, you know, the first and the second version together, so you'll understand. We then have the intermediate switches position, which kind of lower the bass a little bit, maintain everything up top the same. And then we have the both switches both switches off position, where it lowers the bass. Both of these positions, I find them well done, well executed, with plus and negative points. Again, if you look at that 100 hertz point and then compare it to where it matches up, one is slightly more bassier, one is a little bit more open in the mid, so both of them will have their positives and negatives. I ended up listening to the Canon mostly with the 1.1 position, so mostly with the most bass present, so that I got just a little extra mid bass slam. And just to compare that to the 101 here, let me just change the color of the original so you can understand what I'm talking about. Okay, that's the sorry, I made it red, not a good choice. Let's make that green rather. There we go. So the original in the 010 position, and then the Mark II in the 1.1 position. You can see that it's definitely become way more correct sounding. The Mark II version of the Canon, a little bit more extension as well up top, and an overall better IEM than the original, more polished. Not a huge leap forward, but a more polished IEM without question. And then finally, the Pro, where we have as well now the all switches off. Okay, so tucks in at 100 hertz, so very sub bass focused, but very little or very thin in the mid bass. And then we have the intermediate position, and then the most bass position, which is the one that I ended up using. Truth be told, there isn't much of a difference between these two, but I ended up just sticking with the 1.1 position. Okay, if I take that 100 hertz point there and I compare it, you might think, oh, but that's overly energetic, and maybe no, because you've got nice sub bass presence always, which will help control any possible aggressiveness or shoutiness that might occur, which by the way doesn't occur. This is without question the most well tuned of the three Canons in terms of this department. And then when you compare it then with the other versions of the Canon, so let's put here the Mark II, okay, and then let me put here this one in red so it stands out, the original Canon. Okay, so the original Canon in red, the Mark II in blue, and the Pro in the green. all in their preferred settings that I like. What jumps, I think, to your eyes straight away is how the previous versions are way more energetic in terms of the mid bass, and that obviously then manifests itself as being more capable, maybe with songs which are mid bass focused. But I also think it's quite evident that the mids, upper mids, and treble in the Pro version, without question, the most polished. I've just emphasized it slightly. This is more of an audiophile presentation. Let me just take it. This is more of an audiophile way of doing things. The pinna gain, we're talking about a pinna gain of roughly 6 dBs, give or take. Let me 76. Yeah, 6 dBs, just over 6 dBs, so a way more polished way of doing things, without question. Compared to then the Manged T, which is what I was alluding to initially. Let me just change the color of the Manged to red, make that just so that it stands out and you guys can actually see the difference. Comparing it to the Manged, you can understand why I said what I said about the similarity in terms of sound. You can pick up on a little bit more mid bass here and there on the Manged, but you can also pick up on an extra bit of smoothness on the Manged as compared to the Pro. Is the difference huge? No, definitely not. Do you have to really be paying attention to pick up on the difference? Yes, you do. But overall, if you like the T2, you will definitely like the Pro. The Pro, I would end up, I think the best way I can put is that the Pro is a better execution of the T2, in that because it offers those different tuning capabilities, you can get a wider array of presentations. So from a more, let's say, do everything correct presentation, which is this one, to a more vocal focused presentation, which is the case of this presentation of the Canon Pro. All right. Anyway, guys, I hope I was able to shed some light here on the Pro, and that's that. I'll see you in the next one. You take care now. Bye bye.